10 Tales of Christmas, Chapter 3. Sing a Song of Tinsel. Elsa lay shivering in a cold bed, feet drawn up and wrapped in the skirt of her flannel nightgown. Cringing at the chill, rough touch of the cotton blanket, she stretched her toes toward the heated soapstone, inched it closer, wrapped her feet again, and lay quiet. At last she grew warm and turned over to sob noiselessly into her pillow. Susan in the next room must not hear and wonder why she was crying on Christmas night. Through the floor register from the room below, Elsa could hear the whine of the Victrola, a sporadic crackling as her father enjoyed his bowl of holiday nuts, and an occasional shout of high-pitched laughter from her mother and her Aunt Laura. At least, thought Elsa, she had kept so cheerful, even gay, all the day long that no one had guessed her shame. No one, she thought, would ever know why a limp red thread would always hang from her violin. 7 years earlier, on a hot August day, an enormous tent had stood in the village park of Chautauqua. When Grandfather had offered to let Elsa, age 7, use his ticket for one of the concerts, she was thrilled. She told her best friend Sarah, but Sarah sneered. "You're not supposed to use anybody else's ticket," she said. "I have my own." "Grandpa said I could." "That doesn't matter," Sarah shook her head. "Tickets aren't meant for anyone but for the person that buys them. My mother said so." "Well, just the same, I'm going." Elsa swallowed hard. Could it be so wrong? The next day, Elsa went to Chautauqua with Grandmother. As they approached the tent, she held back and eyed the man who was punching tickets. He turned each one around and around, tilting his head to squint through the bottom part of his glasses. Would he notice Grandfather's name written out so plainly? She jerked at her grandmother's elbow. Maybe the man won't let me in on Grandfather's ticket." Grandmother laughed. "Guess it's up to your grandpa how he uses it." Elsa's heart pounded as Grandmother handed over the tickets, but the man only punched them with a sharp click and returned them smiling. Elsa breathed more easily. He hadn't noticed. Of course, Grandmother had known all along that he wouldn't have time to read the name on each, and now they were safely past the door. Inside the tent, Elsa marveled at the crowd of people and their buzz of excitement. When the crimson curtain at last parted, a small orchestra began to play, the first Elsa had ever heard. She leaned toward the aisle to watch the violinist, a young lady in white with a long, dark curl that hung in front of her shoulder. She swayed with the music and tossed back her curl, but when she bowed at the end of each solo, she raised a graceful hand to draw it forward again. Her pieces were gay, sad, sweet, brilliant. Elsa was entranced. "I'm going to play a violin. Somehow I'll get one," she promised herself. She thought about it as she trotted home beside Grandmother, only half hearing the comfortable old voice at her side. That evening after supper, she told her parents about it. "My father played a violin," Mother said. "He brought it all the way from Germany, but it was stolen." She sighed. "I don't know how we could get you another, Elsa, with the store just getting started. Maybe later." Her voice faltered. "I could earn some money," suggested Elsa. "You have so much mending. I'll sew all the buttons." Mother shook her head. "That would be too hard, Elsa." Elsa turned to her father. "Maybe I could help in the store." Father smiled at her over his newspaper. "What could you do there?" "I can count money, and I could sell things, and weigh nails, and measure rope, and lift stoves." "'Fraid not, dear. It takes a man to handle hardware." He slipped his arm around her waist. "Could I have some money instead of a birthday present?" "We might manage that, a little." "I'd buy you a violin if I could, Elsa, but times are hard now." After that, Elsa did not coax, but sometimes when she was alone, she pretended to be a violinist. They had some violin records which she played. Then, with 2 yardsticks for violin and bow, she smiled and bowed for her invisible audience. One day, she was scraping away with the yardsticks when Mother came home early. "Elsa," she explained. Elsa dropped the yardsticks and her face grew hot. Her mother walked toward her. "Do you still want to play a violin?" Without answer, Elsa ran upstairs to her room, banged shut the door, and flung herself on the bed. Her mother followed. We understand, Father and I, she said, only we can't manage it just now. You didn't have to watch me, Elsa sobbed. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Mother's eyes were full of tears. Never again did Elsa play with the yardsticks. The family often took a ride in the square, high, old-fashioned car which Father so carefully washed and greased every Sunday morning. Summer evenings they drove along the little Cedar River to watch the fireflies. In the fall they drove through the wooded hills that blazed with red and gold. But rides through the winter snow were the best of all. Snugly wrapped in auto robes, they watched the falling flakes brush against the windshield. Often, if the store had had a good week, Father would stop at the popcorn wagon. It was there that Elsa saved money. I'd rather have a nickel, she would say. Don't you want any popcorn? Father was amazed. No, I'd rather have the money. You can't be begging from others. He reached into his pocket for some coins. I won't, not even a kernel. Please, I promise. The eager words came in a rush. I'd really rather have the nickel. Father hesitated. What do you think, Mother? Mother sounded tired. You know, she thinks she can save up for a violet. All right, let her try. It won't last anyway. So Elsa received a nickel and held it in her palm all the rest of the ride, hearing in her heart the song of a violin. The popcorn smelled good. It sounded good, but not a kernel did she beg, nor was any offered to her. Father was wrong. The plan lasted and lasted, with Elsa always waiting patiently for the blissful moment when everyone else's popcorn was gone, but the nickel, warm, hard, round, was still in her hand. Slowly, her little hoard grew until she had more than $9. She kept it in a small tin box, counting it out sometimes, arranging it in neat stacks of pennies, nickels, dimes, and a few quarters, and even a dollar bill. One day, Mother returned from a hurried trip to town. With a shrill voice, she called Elsa to the parlor. Elsa ran downstairs and stopped in the doorway, surprised to see her mother's beaming face and the bulky package in her arms. Eagerly, Mother crossed the room and handed the parcel to Elsa. We got it from a customer, she said. Your $9 won't be quite enough, but your father and I will pay the difference. Hesitantly, Elsa took the package. It was wrapped in newspapers, stiff, wide at one end, but narrow at the other. She could only think of one thing that had such a shape. With trembling fingers, she untied the string and tore off the layers of paper, scattering them on the floor. When the last paper fell free, she was holding a battered, dark brown violin, its finish dull with age and laced with scratches. Timidly, she twanged a string, stroked the wood, and slid her hand along the fingerboard. Mine? She asked softly. Smiling, her mother nodded. You're to have lessons, too, from the new dentist's wife, and we've ordered a case from our wholesale house. Elsa lifted the violin to her shoulder and nestled her chin into the cool hardness of the chin rest. She looked along the strings, past her fingers, past the pegs. At the end of the instrument, instead of a curving scroll, she saw a carved lion's head with open jaws. The lion seemed to be smiling back at her, encouraging her to try. Awkwardly, she laid the bow to the string and drew forth a scrunchy sound. I can play it, she thought. I know I can. She stroked the string more lightly and heard a soft tone. Now if I put down a finger, I'll get another note, she thought. I've watched just how they do it. Shiny-eyed, her mother watched while Elsa experimented. She found 2 notes of a scale, and then a third, and from those she built part of Yankee Doodle. Long after her mother had left the room, she struggled. The next day, she wrapped the violin again in newspaper to carry it to her first lesson. She soon found that playing took long, hard practice. But as the weeks passed into months, Elsa's skill grew. She became a fine player. Sorry, dear, we'll have to stop lessons for a while, her father would say when business was bad. Then she would practice by herself until times were better. The teacher herself finally ended the lessons. Elsa is too advanced for me, she explained. Where shall we take her? Mother was worried. You might try Ted Gordon in Cedar City. He plays only wind instruments, but he has some violin pupils and gets good results. There isn't an expert string teacher anywhere close. Mr. Gordon was a tall, spectacled man, alert, with quick movements and a wide grin. Elsa liked him at once, but his class was full. At least hear her play, begged Mother. Mr. Gordon agreed, and sat quietly with his hands clasped. When Elsa finished, he jumped up. I'll take her, but she needs a better instrument. Someday, said Mother, when there's money. For now, lessons are all we can afford. That fall, they drove to Cedar City and Mr. Gordon every weekend. When the drifting snows made the roads dangerous, Elsa made the trip by train. Because Elsa was small for 13, her parents told her to buy a half-fare ticket, and each time the conductor came around, she shrank, trembling into her seat. One afternoon, he looked closely at her. How old are you, young lady? He asked. I'm 13, sir, she faltered. The mustache bristled as he looked from her to the ticket in his hand. That's 40 cents more. Yes, sir. Her cheeks burned as she paid the difference, cringing at the conductor's loud voice. All the way home, she crouched in the corner of the red plush seat, lurching with the train, staring through the window at the lonely landscape. When she reached home and told her what had happened, she burst into tears. Her mother was indignant. I don't think that conductor was one bit nice, she cried. He needn't have been so cross. Elsa's blue eyes flashed. That's not the point. The railroad charges by age. It was cheating. We're always cheating. She clenched her fist. Don't forget, all these lessons cost money, said her mother. If we don't cut corners, you can't take them. Elsa covered her face, sobbing. Her father patted her shoulder. We can manage the extra money, dear. It won't happen again. The year she was 14, Mr. Gordon asked her for help. Raymond Miles is to have a new violin for Christmas. A surprise, he said one day in November. Don't you dare tell. Not a soul. Elsa knew Raymond, a friendly boy whom she had once beaten in a contest. I'll have some violins here on trial, and I want to be sure Raymond gets the best. Would you help pick it out? Mr. Gordon showed her 3 violins. First, he said, play some scales. Warm up. Elsa selected an instrument, laid it on her shoulder, and ran her fingers along the strings. She caught her breath as the notes tumbled from it. If Raymond has one of these, he might beat me in the next contest, she thought. She tried another, and then the third, and then played them all again. Soon she discovered that one violin seemed stiff. Fast things are hard to play on this one, she thought. I hope Raymond gets it. No, I don't. He should have the best. But with this one, he'd be easier to beat. Mr. Gordon, she knew, only played wind instruments. As good a teacher as he was, he had no interest in playing the violin. So Elsa tried hard to play well on the stiff violin. Sometimes it skips a quick note, she thought. I won't play very fast. Maybe he won't notice. Which one has the finest G string? Elsa. Oh, this one. Holding the stiff instrument, she played a few notes with all the resonance she could muster, thinking, of course Mr. Gordon will have someone else play them too. She switched to another, still thinking, for myself, I'd want this light-colored one that plays like the wind. When the test was finished, Mr. Gordon held the stiff violin and then looked at it doubtfully. You picked this one every time, Elsa. He turned it over and continued. It does have a beautiful tone, but is it flexible? That is important too. He laid his hand on the light-colored instrument. This other also sounds beautiful, and you seem to play it with more ease. Are you quite sure? Quite. She looked at the violins. Well then, how shall we mark it? He walked toward the table, which was littered with his wife's sewing. How about this red thread? Red for Christmas. After tying the thread around one peg, he proceeded with the rest of the lesson. Elsa played badly. I've cheated again, she thought, and cheating Raymond is worse than cheating the railroad. A big company wouldn't notice the difference. But a violin means so much. She tried to tell her teacher, Mr. Gordon, there's something... Yes, Elsa? Never mind. All the weeks before Christmas, the thought of Raymond and his violin troubled Elsa. She helped string popcorn for the tree. She decorated special cookies. She tried to match her family's gaiety. You didn't tell us what you want this year, her father said. Not a doll, I hope. No, not a doll, Elsa answered. She thought of Raymond's violin and sighed. Christmas Eve, as always, they burned their tongues on oyster stew and then hurried to church. Afterward, everyone tramped home through the snow and merrily hung a stocking. It snowed in the night, so the morning was clear and bright. The base of the Christmas tree was hidden by a drift of packages tied with Christmas bows. Bright colored lights glowed among the popcorn and cranberries. Susan and Freddie squealed with excitement. See, Susan, that was Aunt Laura. See what Santa has left you? A mama doll. Bend it over. Aunt Laura held the doll for a wondering Susan. There are mittens all around. That was Mother, who had knit them late at night. And what have you, Elsa? This was from Father. Boots and some books? But I see another package. Seeing the twinkle in her father's eyes, Elsa glanced warily where he pointed and spied a large package, half hidden behind the others. Could it be the new coat she needed so badly? The grown-ups quieted their cheerful hubbub to watch Elsa open her package. She sat down on the floor beside it and tore off the white paper. As she expected, the box was from Lampman's clothing store. Probably the blue coat that had been on their window on sale. Then she snatched off the cover and saw what the box contained. A violin. A violin, yes, but just one of Father Christmas's jokes. A cruel joke this time. It was the battered dark fiddle with the lion's head scroll. Elsa turned away, clenching her hands while the family shrieked with laughter. Guess we fooled you that time, Father sputtered. Your old violin in a Lampman's coat box. His shoulders were shaking, but then he noticed her quivering lips. He added gently, Elsa, old Santa isn't such a bad sort. Why don't you look in your violin case? She jumped up, scurried across the room, snatched her case from the corner, and laid it on the table. With trembling fingers, she fumbled at the catch and lifted out a violin. It was shiny and new and looked very familiar. But Elsa, running her hand up to the pegs, found, as she had somehow expected, a little piece of red thread. How shall we mark it, Mr. Gordon had said, and he had tied that red thread to the stiff violin Elsa had chosen for Raymond. Red is for Christmas, she thought now. But Mr. Gordon picked the wrong color. He should have chosen green, for envy. Silently she stroked the strings, imagining how it would have felt to have owned the light-colored violin. As she glanced at her parents' beaming faces, she suddenly remembered that her father had decided to wear his threadbare overcoat for another winter, and that her mother had spent hours beside the window making over an old dress. Gently putting the violin back in its case, she rushed to her father. He patted her shoulder. How about a tune, Elsa? Your favorite? He nodded his head. As she picked up the violin, the red thread dangled there, its knot half untied. Slowly and carefully, Elsa took the ends of the knot in her fingers. She firmly retied the knot. And then, laying bow to string, she quickly turned her instrument and played. Not too fast, while her family joyously sang, We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Story by Dorothy N. Morrison.